Please, take me. Take my body. I just need money to save my mother.
The rain hammered against the windows of Seoul National University Hospital with relentless fury, each drop a reminder of the storm brewing inside Sandra Eze's chest. She sat in the sterile waiting room, her fingers trembling as she clutched a crumpled tissue. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the white walls that seemed to close in around her. Her mother, Grace Eze, lay in a room 3 floors above, her body ravaged by stage 4 cancer that had spread faster than anyone anticipated. Sandra had always been a fighter. At 23, she'd moved from Lagos to Seoul 2 years ago on a scholarship to study international business at Yonsei University. She'd worked part-time jobs, sent money home, and maintained perfect grades. But nothing in her life had prepared her for this moment, for the conversation she'd just had with Dr. Park. "Miss Eze, I need to be direct with you," Dr. Park had said, his voice clinical but not unkind. "Your mother's treatment requires immediate continuation. The new chemotherapy protocol we discussed, combined with the targeted radiation therapy, it's expensive. Without payment by tomorrow morning, we'll have to halt everything and move her to palliative care only." The number he'd quoted made Sandra's vision blur. 50 million won, roughly $42,000. She had $300 in her bank account and a maxed-out credit card she'd used to fly her mother to Seoul when the Nigerian hospitals had given up hope. She'd spent the last 6 hours making calls. Her father had died when she was 12, leaving no inheritance. Her relatives in Nigeria were struggling themselves. The Scholarship Foundation had rules against emergency loans. Banks laughed at her loan applications, no collateral, no cosigner, no chance. Every door slammed in her face with the same resounding finality. Now, as midnight approached, Sandra sat in that waiting room and did something she never thought she'd do. She opened her phone and searched for options she'd always considered unthinkable. Her fingers moved almost mechanically, typing words that made her stomach turn. Fast money Seoul, emergency cash, desperate measures. The results were predictably grim. Loan sharks with interest rates that would drown her. Escort services with veiled language. And then, buried in a forum for international students, she found a post that made her breath catch. Discreet arrangement for university students in financial crisis. One-time transaction, significant compensation, confidential, contact for details. The phone number had a Korean prefix. Sandra stared at it for 10 minutes, her thumb hovering over the screen. She knew what this was. She wasn't naive. But as she looked up at the ceiling, imagining her mother 3 floors above fighting for every breath, she pressed dial. A woman answered on the second ring. Her voice was professional, almost businesslike. "You're calling about the arrangement?" "Yes," Sandra whispered, her voice barely audible. "Are you over 21? 23. Passport and medical clearance will be required. The compensation is 50 million won, cash, paid immediately after. The client is very particular. Discretion is absolute. Are you certain you want to proceed?" Sandra closed her eyes. 50 million won, exactly what she needed. The universe's cruelest coincidence or darkest mercy, she couldn't tell. "I'm certain," she said, and the words felt like signing away her soul. "Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., Lee Resorts, Gangnam, penthouse suite. Come alone. Bring your passport and recent medical documentation. A car will pick you up from the address you provide." The call ended. Sandra sat in the silence of the waiting room, the rain still pounding against the windows, and let the tears finally fall. She wasn't crying for what she was about to do. There was no room for self-pity when her mother's life hung in the balance. She cried because she knew that after tomorrow night, she would never be the same person again. The next evening arrived too quickly. Sandra had spent the day in a fog, sitting by her mother's bedside, holding her frail hand. Grace Eze had been a professor of literature in Lagos, a woman of sharp intellect and sharper wit. Now she barely had the strength to squeeze Sandra's fingers. "My brave girl," her mother had whispered, her voice thin as paper. "You look troubled." Sandra forced a smile. "Just worried about you, Mama." "Don't worry. God will provide. He always does." Sandra nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. If only her mother knew the devil's bargain she was about to make in God's name. At 7:30 p.m., Sandra stood in front of the mirror in her tiny studio apartment in Hongdae. She'd chosen a simple black dress, modest but presentable. Her dark skin glowed against the fabric, her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked like she was going to a funeral. In a way, she supposed she was the funeral of her innocence. The black car arrived exactly on time, a sleek Mercedes with tinted windows. The driver, a middle-aged Korean man in a suit, said nothing as he opened the door for her. The ride through Seoul's neon-lit streets felt surreal, like she was watching her life happen to someone else. Lee Resorts towered over Gangnam like a monument to wealth and excess. The building was all glass and steel, reflecting the city lights in a dizzying display. Sandra had walked past it dozens of times, never imagining she'd enter through its gold-trimmed doors, let alone for this reason. The driver led her through a private entrance, away from the main lobby. They took a private elevator that required a keycard. The ascent to the penthouse felt eternal, her stomach dropping with each floor they passed. When the doors finally opened, Sandra stepped into a space that took her breath away. The penthouse was massive, decorated in minimalist luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seoul's glittering skyline. White marble floors reflected the ambient lighting. Modern art adorned the walls, pieces Sandra recognized from her art history elective, originals that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. And there, standing by the window with his back to her, was Dante Choi. He turned slowly, and Sandra's first thought was that he looked like he'd been carved from ice. Dante was tall, probably 6 feet, with the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers, sharp jawline, high cheekbones, eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His black hair was styled back, and he wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire year's tuition. He looked to be in his early 30s, and there was something predatory in the way he moved, each gesture controlled and deliberate. "Sandra Ezzy," he said, his voice deep and accented with perfect English. "You're more beautiful than your photo suggested." Sandra hadn't sent a photo. The realization that he'd somehow obtained one sent a chill down her spine. "Thank you for coming," Dante continued, moving closer. "I know this isn't easy. Would you like a drink?" "No, thank you," Sandra managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Dante smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Nervous?" "Terrified," she admitted honestly. There was no point in pretending. "Good. Fear means you understand the gravity of what's happening here." He gestured to the leather sofa. "Sit. Let's talk first." Sandra sat, her back rigid. Dante settled into the chair across from her, crossing his legs with casual elegance. On the coffee table between them sat a black briefcase. "The money," Dante said, tapping the briefcase with one finger. 50 million won, as promised. All cash, untraceable. Enough to save your mother's life and cover your expenses for several months afterward. "How do you know about my blay, mother?" Sandra asked, though she already suspected the answer. "I know everything about you, Sandra. Where you were born, Surulere, Lagos. Your scholarship to Yonsei. Your father's death when you were 12. Your mother's diagnosis 3 months ago. Your desperate calls to every financial institution in Seoul today." He leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "I make it my business to know the people I do business with." "Who are you?" Sandra whispered. "Someone with resources and particular tastes," Dante replied smoothly. "I run several legitimate businesses in Seoul: real estate, entertainment, hospitality. But I also operate in spaces where the law is more flexible. The Shadow Circle, my organization, controls significant portions of Seoul's underground economy. I tell you this not to frighten you, but so you understand that discretion is not optional. It's survival." Sandra's hands clenched in her lap. "I understand. Do you?" Dante stood, walking to the refree window. "Once this transaction is complete, Sandra, you will be connected to me, not just in memory, but in reality. The money I give you tonight creates a bond, whether you acknowledge it or not." "I'm here to save my mother," Sandra said firmly. "Nothing more." Dante turned, and for the first time, she saw something flicker in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or amusement. "Your loyalty is admirable. It's why I chose you. Women like you, women who sacrifice everything for family, possess a strength that money can't buy." He returned to stand before her. The arrangement is simple. Tonight, you give me what I've paid for. Tomorrow, you walk away with enough money to save your mother and rebuild your life. No strings, no obligations beyond tonight. But Sandra heard the lie in his words, saw it in the possessive way his eyes traced her face. This man didn't make transactions without strings. She just couldn't see them yet. I need to use the bathroom, Sandra said, needing a moment alone. Dante gestured down the hall. First door on the left. In the bathroom, all marble and gold fixtures, Sandra splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection. The girl looking back at her seemed like a stranger. 23 years old, about to sell the one thing she'd always believed should be given freely, out of love. But what was love if not sacrifice? She loved her mother more than her own dignity, more than her own body. That had to count for something. She dried her face, straightened her dress, and walked back into the main room. Dante was pouring himself a glass of whiskey. Ready? Sandra nodded. There were no words left. He set down his glass and opened the briefcase, showing her the neatly stacked bills inside. Count it if you'd like. I trust you, Sandra said, though she didn't. But what choice did she have at this point? Dante closed the briefcase and set it aside. He approached her slowly, giving her every chance to flee. But Sandra stood her ground, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. When he reached her, he lifted one hand to her face, his fingers surprisingly gentle against her cheek. You're shaking, he observed. I'm scared, Sandra admitted again. Don't be. I'm not a monster, Sandra. I won't hurt you. His thumb traced her lower lip. But I will own this moment. I will own the memory of this night. And whether you realize it or not, a part of you will belong to me forever. Then he kissed her, and Sandra's world tilted. His lips were firm, demanding, claiming her mouth with an expertise that left her breathless. She didn't kiss him back, couldn't bring herself to participate in her own transaction, but he didn't seem to need her cooperation. He was taking what he'd paid for, and there was something almost ritualistic in his movements, as if this were more than physical desire. When he pulled back, his eyes were darker than before. The bedroom is through there, he said, his voice rough. What happened in that bedroom would haunt Sandra for the rest of her life. Not because Dante was cruel, he was surprisingly patient, almost reverent in how he undressed her, how he explored her body with hands that knew exactly what they were doing. But the pain was real, both physical and emotional. She cried silently as he took her innocence, as he murmured words in Korean she didn't understand against her skin, as he claimed her body with the same possessive certainty with which he handled everything in his life. When it was over, Sandra lay in the massive bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling hollow. Dante had disappeared into the bathroom. She heard the shower running. Mechanically, she got up, dressed, her body aching in unfamiliar ways. Dante emerged, dressed in black slacks and a white shirt, looking as composed as if they'd just had a business meeting. He handed her the briefcase. The money, he said. As promised, Sandra took it with numb hands. My driver will take you wherever you need to go, Dante continued. The hospital, I assume? She nodded. Sandra. He caught her wrist gently before she could leave. What happened tonight doesn't define you. You did what you had to do to save someone you love. There's no shame in that. But his words felt empty. There was shame in it deep, burning shame that she knew would never fully leave her. Thank you, she whispered, though she didn't mean it. Dante released her wrist but held her gaze. I'll be seeing you again. No, Sandra said firmly. This was one night. That was the arrangement. He smiled that cold smile again. We'll see. The ride back through Seoul's streets was a blur. Sandra clutched the briefcase to her chest, feeling its weight like an anchor. When the car dropped her at the hospital's entrance, dawn was just beginning to break over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A beautiful morning for such an ugly transaction. Dr. Park was making his early rounds when Sandra found him. She opened the briefcase in his office, watching his eyes widen at the cash inside. This covers everything? She asked. Yes, he said, clearly trying not to ask questions about where a student had obtained this much cash overnight. We can start the new protocol immediately. Then start it, Sandra said. Save my mother. The next 2 weeks passed in an exhausted blur. Sandra spent every spare moment at the hospital, watching as the new treatment began to work small miracles. Her mother's color improved. She could eat without nausea. She smiled more. The cancer wasn't gone, doctor. Park was careful to manage expectations, but it was retreating, giving them hope where before there had been only resignation. Sandra told her mother that a wealthy friend from university had loaned her the money, a lie that came easier than she expected. Grace Eze was too relieved to question it deeply, too focused on fighting her way back to health. But Sandra couldn't forget that night. It lived in her body, in her dreams, in the mirror every morning when she showered and saw the faint marks Dante's hands had left on her hips. She felt changed in ways she couldn't articulate, as if she'd left something essential of herself in that penthouse and returned only with a hollowed-out shell. She tried to return to normalcy, classes, studying, sitting with her mother. But normalcy felt like a costume that no longer fit. Then the gifts started arriving. The first was a bouquet of white roses delivered to her apartment with no card. Sandra threw them away, disturbed. The second was the hospital bill marked paid in full for the next 3 months. The third was an envelope of cash left on her apartment doorstep. 20 million won. She hadn't asked for it, hadn't wanted it, but the message was clear. Dante Choi wasn't done with her. It was a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after that night, when Sandra finally saw him again. She was leaving the hospital after visiting her mother when a familiar black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and there he was. "Get in," Dante said. "No," Sandra replied, her heart racing. "I'm not asking, Sandra. Get in the car, or I'll make a scene, and I promise you won't like the consequences." There was no threat in his voice, just calm certainty. Sandra glanced around at the people walking past the hospital entrance, then reluctantly opened the car door. The interior smelled of expensive leather and Dante's cologne. He sat beside her in the back seat, too close, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. "You've been avoiding me," he said as the car pulled into traffic. "We had an arrangement. One night. It's over. Nothing's over until I say it is." He turned to face her fully. "Do you know what I've been doing these last 3 weeks, Sandra? Thinking about you. Dreaming about you. That night was supposed to be enough. It never is enough, but I convinced myself it would be. I was wrong. I don't care what you want," Sandra said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I kept my end of the bargain. You need to keep yours and leave me alone." Dante's laugh was soft, almost sad. "Leave you alone? Sandra, you're the most interesting thing that's happened to me in 5 years. Do you think I can just forget you? You have to." "No," he said simply. "I don't." The car was heading toward Gangnam, toward the glittering heart of Seoul's wealth. Sandra realized with growing dread where they were going. "Take me back to the hospital," she demanded. "Soon," Dante promised. "First, we're going to have dinner." "I don't want to have dinner with you." "Then you'll sit and watch me eat," he said, unbothered by her refusal. "Either way, we're going to talk." The car stopped in front of Crimson, one of Seoul's most exclusive restaurants. Sandra had read about it in magazines, minimum spending of 2 million won per person, reservation list months long, frequented by celebrities and business moguls, the kind of place she'd never imagined entering. Dante exited the car and held the door for her. She had 2 choices, make a scene on the street or follow him inside. Trapped, she chose the latter. Inside, Crimson was breathtaking. Dark red walls, intimate lighting, tables spaced far enough apart to ensure privacy. A host bowed deeply to Dante and led them to a private room in the back, a space with a single table and a window overlooking Seoul's nighttime skyline. "Your usual room, Mr. Choi," the host said before disappearing. They sat across from each other, and Sandra felt like she was trapped in a twisted repeat of that first night. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Dante poured water into her glass, then his own. "Because I want to. That's not a reason. It's the only reason that matters in my world," he countered. "I want something. I take it. I wanted you that night. I bought you. I want you now, so here you are." "I'm not a possession," Sandra said through gritted teeth. "Aren't you?" Dante leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I paid for you, Sandra. That makes you mine. You paid for one night. And that night created a connection between us. Whether you like it or not, you belong to me now." Sandra stood abruptly. "I'm leaving." "Sit down," Dante said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "Make me. Sandra." He stood as well, moving around the table with predatory grace. You don't want to challenge me. I've been patient, gentle even. But my patience has limits. What are you going to do? Hurt me? Force me? Never, Dante said, and she believed him. But there are other ways to make you comply. Your mother's treatment, for instance, very expensive. It would be a shame if suddenly the hospital couldn't accommodate her anymore. Sandra felt ice flood her veins. You wouldn't. I would do whatever necessary to keep you close, Dante said calmly. That's what you need to understand. This isn't a game to me. This isn't some rich man's passing fancy. I want you, Sandra. And I protect what's mine. By threatening my dying mother, Sandra's voice shook with rage. By making you realize you have no good options except accepting reality, Dante corrected. I can make your life very comfortable, Sandra. Safe, easy, or I can make it impossible. The choice is yours. Sandra sank back into her chair, defeated. Why me? Why are you doing this to me? Dante returned to his seat, his expression softening slightly. Because you're real. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Everyone wants something from me. Everyone lies, manipulates, performs. But you that night, you were terrified and brave and honest. You sacrificed everything for someone you love. That kind of loyalty, that kind of strength, it's intoxicating. I'm not strong, Sandra whispered. I'm broken. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Dante said with unsettling certainty. And you're mine now. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. A waiter brought food Sandra hadn't ordered. She picked at it mechanically while Dante ate with refined efficiency, explaining his terms as if negotiating a business contract. You'll continue your studies, he said. I'll cover all expenses. Your mother will receive the best care available. No cost to you. You'll move to a better apartment. The one you're in now is barely livable. And in return, you'll see me when I call. You'll belong to me. What does that mean? Sandra asked. Belong to you? It means you're mine to protect, mine to care for, mine to touch when I want. He said it so matter-of-factly, as if he were discussing the weather. I'm not asking you to love me, Sandra. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm simply telling you how things are going to be. And if I refuse? You won't, Dante said with maddening confidence. Because refusing me means watching your mother die, and you've already proven you'll do anything to save her. He was right, and they both knew it. Sandra had already sold herself once to save her mother. What was selling herself again and again and again? I hate you, she said quietly. I know, Dante replied without offense. But hate is better than indifference. At least you feel something. The next weeks fell into a disturbing pattern. Dante would summon her sometimes to dinner, sometimes to his penthouse, sometimes just to sit in his car while he conducted business on the phone. He never forced himself on her again physically, which somehow made it worse. He was waiting for something, she realized. Waiting for her to break, to accept, to come to him willingly. Sandra's mother continued to improve, the treatments working better than Dr. Park had hoped. Grace AZ was scheduled to be discharged within the month, well enough to return to a rented apartment where she could continue recovery. You look troubled, my daughter. Her mother said one afternoon. They were sitting in the hospital garden, enjoying the spring sunshine. Just tired, Mama, Sandra lied. You've been so distant lately. Ever since. Grace trailed off, studying her daughter's face. Since you got that money, Sandra, where did it really come from? I told you. A friend loaned it to me. What kind of friend has millions of one to loan? Grace pressed gently. Sandra, please, tell me the truth. I'd rather die knowing than live wondering what price you paid for my life. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. Mama, please don't ask me that. Oh, my baby girl. Grace reached for Sandra's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. What did you do? What I had to, Sandra whispered. What anyone would do for someone they love. Grace pulled Sandra into her arms, and they both cried in that garden, mother and daughter, bound by love and the terrible sacrifices it demanded. That evening, when Sandra returned to her apartment, Dante was waiting. Inside. How did you get in? She demanded, though she already knew. There was nowhere in Seoul this man couldn't reach. We need to talk, he said, ignoring her question. He was standing by her window, looking out at the modest view of Hongdae's streets. We have nothing to talk about. There's a problem, Dante continued. The Shadow Circle has enemies, rival organizations, ambitious underbosses, people who want what I have. Recently, one of these groups learned about you. Sandra's blood ran cold. What? Dante turned to face her. They know you're important to me, which makes you a target. Important to you? Sandra laughed bitterly. I'm your prisoner. You're mine, Dante corrected. There's a difference. And because you're mine, you're in danger. Then let me go. Tell everyone you're done with me. It doesn't work that way, Dante said, approaching her. Once you're marked as mine, you're always in danger. The only solution is protection. I don't want your protection. Too bad, he said flatly. Starting tomorrow, you'll have security. 2 of my men will shadow you everywhere. You'll check in with me twice daily. And you'll move to a secure location. Absolutely not, Sandra said. I'm not giving up my entire life because you decided to obsess over me. Sandra, Dante's voice turned sharp. This isn't negotiable. These people don't kidnap for ransom. They kidnap to send messages. They'll hurt you in ways that will make what we shared look like tenderness. They'll record it, send it to me, and laugh while you scream. The graphic brutality of his words made Sandra stumble backward. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to make you understand reality, Dante said. You think I'm the monster? I'm nothing compared to what's out there. At least I value you. They see you as meat, as a tool to break me. Why should I believe anything you say? Dante pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. It was grainy, clearly taken, from a distance, but unmistakable. It showed Sandra leaving the hospital, and someone had drawn a red X over her face. They sent this to me 3 days ago, Dante said quietly, along with a message. Pretty girl, shame if something happened to her. Sandra felt her legs give out. She sank onto her small couch, her head spinning. Dante knelt before her, his hands on her knees, his dark eyes intense. I know you hate me. I know you think I'm ruining your life, but I will not let them hurt you. I will burn Soul to the ground before I let anyone touch what's mine. I don't want this, Sandra whispered. I just wanted to save my mother and live my life. I know, Dante said, and for once, she heard genuine regret in his voice. But that option ended the moment you walked into LI Resorts. You're in my world now, Sandra. And in my world, there's only one way to stay safe. Stay close to me. The next morning, 2 men in dark suits appeared outside Sandra's apartment. Dante's, security. They followed her to class, sat in their car while she studied at the library, trailed her to the hospital. Sandra felt like she was suffocating, her freedom shrinking by the hour. A week later, the situation escalated. Sandra was walking from the campus library to the subway station when a van screeched to a halt beside her. The side door flew open, and hands reached out, grabbing her arms. She screamed, struggling, but there were too many of them, 3 men in masks, dragging her toward the van. Then gunshots. Dante's security guards opened fire, not at the men, but at the van's tires. The men dropped Sandra and fled, the van speeding away on flattened rubber, scraping against the asphalt. One of the guards immediately called someone while the other checked Sandra for injuries. Mrs., are you hurt? Sandra couldn't speak. She was shaking so violently her teeth chattered. Within minutes, another car arrived. Dante got out, his face a mask of controlled fury. He went straight to Sandra, pulling her into his arms without asking permission. You're okay, he murmured against her hair. You're okay. I've got you. Sandra clung to him despite herself, too shocked to maintain her hatred. In that moment, he wasn't her captor. He was safety, strength, the only solid thing in a world that had just tried to swallow her whole. Take her to Blackwater Estate. Dante ordered his men. I'll follow. Blackwater Estate was located in the hills outside Seoul, accessible only by a private road guarded by security checkpoints. The mansion was modern and fortress-like, all concrete and glass, surrounded by high walls and surveillance cameras, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Inside, Sandra was taken to a bedroom suite larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a garden, but she noticed they were bulletproof. Every luxury imaginable was provided, but it was still a cage. Dante appeared an hour later. He'd changed into casual clothes, black jeans, and a gray sweater that made him look younger, less intimidating. How are you feeling? He asked. Scared, Sandra admitted. Angry. Trapped. All reasonable responses, Dante said, sitting in the chair across from where she sat on the bed. I'm sorry, Sandra. I tried to prevent this. By dragging me deeper into your world, by trying to keep you hidden, he corrected. But my enemies are thorough. They've been watching me for months, waiting for a weakness. You're that weakness. Then push me away, Sandra said desperately. Make them think you don't care about me anymore. I can't, Dante said simply. It's too late. They've seen how I react to threats against you. They know. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. And even if I could convince them, Sandra, I wouldn't, because it would be a lie. I do care about you. More than I should, more than is wise, more than I've cared about anything in a very long time. You don't care about me, Sandra said bitterly. You care about owning me. Maybe that's the only way I know how to care, Dante replied. My father was a loan shark who beat my mother. I joined the Shadow Circle when I was 15, killed my first man at 17, took control at 25 by being more ruthless than anyone else. I don't know how to be soft, Sandra. I don't know how to want something without taking it. But what I feel for you, it's real. It's possessive and probably unhealthy, but it's real. Sandra looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something beneath the cold exterior. Pain, maybe. Loneliness. The scars of a man who'd survived by becoming a monster and forgotten how to be anything else. I didn't ask for this, she said quietly. I know, Dante said. But here we are. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of their impossible situation settling around them. What happens now? Sandra finally asked. Now? Dante stood. Now you stay here where it's safe. Your mother will be moved to a private facility with round-the-clock care. You'll continue your studies remotely. And I'll handle the people who tried to take you today. Handle them how? Dante's smile was cold. You don't want to know. He moved toward the door, then paused. Sandra, I know you hate me, but I need you to understand something. In my world, love and violence are the same language. The fact that I'm willing to kill for you, that's as close to love as I can get. Then he left, leaving Sandra alone in her golden cage, wondering how her life had spiraled so completely out of control. Days bled into weeks at Blackwater Estate. Sandra's mother was indeed moved to a luxury recovery facility, given every comfort and treatment available. Grace Eze believed her daughter was staying with wealthy friends who were helping them during this difficult time. Another lie to add to the mountain Sandra was building. Sandra attended her university classes via video conference. Professors were told she was dealing with a family emergency and needed accommodation. No one questioned it, not when significant donations to the university appeared from an anonymous benefactor. Dante visited every evening. Sometimes they had dinner together in silence. Sometimes he worked on his laptop while she read. Sometimes they just sat in the same room, existing in each other's orbit. It was a strange, surreal domesticity that felt more like a Stockholm Syndrome experiment than a relationship. But Sandra couldn't deny that her feelings were evolving in complicated ways. She still resented him, still felt trapped, still mourned the life she'd lost. But she also felt safe for the first time since her mother's diagnosis. And when Dante looked at her with those dark, intense eyes, she felt something she didn't want, to name something that frightened her more than his threats ever had. One night, a month after the kidnapping attempt, Dante came to her room later than usual. It was past midnight, and Sandra was reading in bed when he knocked. Can I come in? He asked, and the fact that he asked surprised her. It's your house, Sandra pointed out. Dante entered but didn't approach the bed. Instead, he stood by the window, looking out at the Seoul skyline visible in the distance. I found the men who tried to take you, he said quietly. Sandra set down her book. What did you do to them? What needed to be done? Dante replied. They won't be hurting anyone again. Sandra knew she should feel horror, disgust. Instead, she felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. Those men had tried to kidnap her, to use her as a weapon against Dante. Whatever he'd done to them, they'd earned it. Thank you, she said, and the words felt wrong and right simultaneously. Dante turned to look at her, surprise flickering across his face. You're thanking me for murdering people? I'm thanking you for protecting me, Sandra corrected. Even though I never asked for your protection, even though this is all your fault, I'm still thanking you, because, she trailed off, unsure how to finish. Because you're starting to understand. Dante finished for her. He crossed the room, sitting on the edge of her bed. You're starting to see that in this world, morality is a luxury. Survival is what matters. I don't want to become like you, Sandra whispered. You won't, Dante assured her. You'll always have that light inside you, that goodness. It's what drew me to you in the first place. His hand reached out, cupping her face with surprising gentleness. You make me want to be better, Sandra, even though I know I never will be. Sandra should pull away. She knew that, but she didn't. Instead, she leaned into his touch, starving for human warmth after weeks of isolation. I hate that I don't hate you anymore, she admitted. I know, Dante said. But hate and desire are closer than people think. Both consume you. Both refuse to let go. Then he kissed her, and this time, Sandra kissed him back. Not because she had to, not because she was afraid, but because some broken part of her wanted to. Wanted him. This dangerous, violent, impossibly complicated man who'd ruined her life and protected it in equal measure. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. Tell me to leave, he said hoarsely. Tell me you don't want this, and I'll walk away right now. Sandra knew she should say the words, should reclaim some scrap of control over her life. But she'd been so alone, so scared, carrying so many secrets and lies. And Dante was the only person who knew all of her, the worst of her, and still looked at her like she was something precious. Stay, she whispered instead, and sealed her fate. What happened that night was nothing like their first encounter. This time, there was no transaction, no pain, no fear, just two broken people finding solace in each other, however twisted and unhealthy that solace might be. Dante was gentle in ways Sandra hadn't known he could be, worshipping her body like she was sacred instead of purchased. And Sandra let herself feel, let herself want, let herself fall into the darkness with him. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the massive bed, the Seoul skyline glittering beyond the windows like a field of fallen stars. This changes things, Dante said quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Does it? Sandra asked. It means you're choosing this, choosing me, not because you have to, but because you want to. Sandra closed her eyes. Was she choosing him, or had she simply given up fighting? She didn't know anymore. The lines had blurred beyond recognition. I don't know what I want anymore, she admitted. That's okay, Dante replied. You have time to figure it out. But they both knew that was a lie. Time was the one thing Sandra Ezzi no longer had. She'd traded it away that first night at LI. Resorts, along with her innocence and her freedom. Now she belonged to Dante Choi, body, soul, and whatever broken pieces remained of her heart. As she drifted off to sleep in his arms, Sandra wondered if her mother had been right after all. God had provided. He'd just sent the devil to do his work. The next morning, Sandra woke to find Dante already dressed for the day, sitting at the desk in her room, working on his laptop. Sunlight streamed through the windows, making the previous night feel like a dream or a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Your mother is being discharged next week, Dante said without looking up. I've arranged for an apartment in Gangnam, close to the recovery facility. 24-hour nursing care, everything she'll need. Thank you, Sandra said automatically, then hated herself for it. She was thanking him for benefits she'd never have needed if not for him in the first place. Dante finally looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. I have business to attend to today. I'll be back tonight. Don't leave the estate. Where would I go? Sandra asked bitterly. Exactly, Dante replied, closing his laptop. He stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and became once again the cold, controlled Mafia boss who ruled Seoul's underworld. The gentle lover from last night might as well have been a different person. At the door, he paused. Sandra? Last night wasn't a mistake. Not to me. Then he was gone, leaving Sandra alone with her conflicted feelings and the lingering scent of his cologne on her sheets. The day dragged endlessly. Sandra tried to focus on her coursework, but her mind kept wandering. She thought about her mother, recovering in blissful ignorance of the price her daughter had paid. She thought about her life in Lagos, the girl she used to be who dreamed of international business success and making her parents proud. That girl seemed like a stranger now. She thought about Dante, and that was the most confusing thought of all. Evening came, bringing with it a storm. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and rain began to hammer against the windows, just like that first night at the hospital when this nightmare began. Sandra stood at the window, watching lightning illuminate the Seoul skyline, when her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" She answered cautiously, heavy breathing on the other end, then a voice distorted by some electronic device. Sandra Eze, the Nigerian whore warming Dante Choi's bed. Sandra's blood turned to ice. "We know you're at Blackwater Estate," the voice continued. "We know about your mother at the Jung Medical Center. We know everything, little bird, and soon we'll come for you. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. And when we do, Dante Choi will watch you die slowly, screaming his name, begging him to save you, and he'll be powerless to stop it." The line went dead. Sandra's phone slipped from her trembling fingers. She wanted to call Dante, to tell him about the threat, but pride stopped her. Wasn't this exactly what he wanted? For her to be so scared she'd cling to him? But as thunder cracked overhead and the storm intensified, Sandra realized something fundamental. She was already clinging to him, had been since that night at LI Resorts. Her hatred, her resentment, even her reluctant desire, it was all just different ways of being bound to Dante Choi. When Dante returned late that night, soaked from the rain, Sandra was still standing at the window. "Sandra?" His voice was immediately concerned. "What's wrong?" She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "They called. The people who want to kill you. They called and threatened me and my mother," and Dante crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry. I'll increase security. I'll move your mother somewhere even safer. I'll..." "Stop," Sandra said, pulling back to look at him. "Just stop. You can't protect me from everything. You can't control the entire world, Dante." "I can try," he said fiercely. "For you, I'll try." And looking into his eyes, seeing the genuine fear there, fear for her, not of losing his possession but of her being hurt, Sandra finally understood the terrible truth. Dante Choi loved her. In his broken, violent, possessive way, he loved her. And God help her, she was starting to love him back. "I don't want to feel this way," she whispered. "Neither do I," Dante replied. But here we are. Here they were indeed, trapped together in a story neither had written but both would have to live. Sandra Eze, who came to Seoul to study and build a future, now bound to a man who lived in shadows. Dante Choi, who'd thought buying one night with a desperate girl would satisfy his curiosity, now consumed by feelings he'd spent years trying to kill. Outside, the storm raged on, washing the city clean while leaving their souls stained. Inside Blackwater Estate, 2 broken people held each other and pretended they had any control over where this dangerous road would lead. Because love, or whatever dark